Hey, what's up? What's going on, everybody? HTimbers here, and today I bought another video game system to do a little review on, and to make more gameplay videos of it. And the new video game system that I got is the Game Boy Advance. Yeah, and this is a pink Game Boy Advance. Now, don't go hating on me because I got a pink one. The only reason why I bought a pink Game Boy Advance is because this was the only color they had, alright? They didn't have any other colors like blue, green, red, yellow, or platinum or whatever. But I wish they had platinum. If they had platinum, then I would definitely have bought it. Even though it would have probably cost more. But don't go hating me because I got a pink Game Boy Advance. Because this was the only color they had. They had two Game Boy Advances in the store, and they both were pink. So yeah, got pink Game Boy Advance. And I really like the design of this little system, y'all. I really like how they designed the Game Boy Advance. And even though it's pretty small and like width, alright, even though it's pretty long, I don't remember what's length or width. I'm guessing that this the length and this the width. I don't fucking know. But anyways, guys, so even though it's pretty small in length, it is pretty long width. It looks about the same width as the original Game Boy, almost like a couple, like 2 inches or so longer. All right. So yeah. So I really like how they designed this system. It's pretty cool. And what's really good about this thing is if you don't have a Game Boy or Game Boy Color, and yet you have a Game Boy Color and yet you have Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, and you have a Game Boy Advance, you can play both your Game Boy and Game Boy Color games on the Game Boy Advance. But you can only play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games on the Game Boy Advance, on the original Game Boy Advance, and the Game Boy Advance SP. Alright, yeah. So there are 3 models of the Game Boy Advance. Alright, they have the original Game Boy Advance, which is this. They have the Game Boy Advance SP, which is kind of like a Nintendo DS, except the screen is on the top and the controls on the bottom. Alright, so there's the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Advance SP, and they have the Game Boy Micro. And I'm going to tell y'all right now, if y'all plan on like getting one of those 3 Game Boy models, do not, and I repeat, do not get a Game Boy Micro. The only reason why I say don't get a Game Boy Micro is because even though it does play Game Boy Advance games, you can't play Game Boy or Game Boy Color games on the thing to unfortunately. Yeah, because even though you can play both Game Boy and Game Boy Color games on the Game Boy, well, not Game Boy Micro. Oh my gosh, what am I saying? Even though you can play Game Boy Advance games on the Game Boy Micro, y'all, alright? Even though you can play Game Boy Advance games on the Game Boy Micro, which of course you can because it's another alternative model of the Game Boy Advance. Even though you can play Game Boy Advance games on the Game Boy Micro, you can't play Game Boy or Game Boy Color games on the Game Boy Micro, unfortunately. So if you're looking to buy a Game Boy Advance system, I would consider the original Game Boy Advance, which is what I have, or the Game Boy Advance SP. If you have Game Boy Color games, and you want to play them on the Game Boy Advance, just buy one of those. But if you just want it so you can play Game Boy Advance games, like I kind of sort of would, then I would recommend then you can just get any Game Boy model, including the Game Boy Micro. But only if you just go and play only Game Boy Advance games, then you can buy each of the three models. But if you want to play both Game Boy and Game Boy Color games and Game Boy Advance games, now consider an original Game Boy Advance or Game Boy Advance SP. Alright. But anyways guys, I got two games with this system. Alright. And I got Mario Kart Super Circuit and Game & Watch Gallery 4. These were the only two games I found interesting. I did find like two more games that were interesting, which were Wario Land 4 and WarioWare, but I didn't feel like spending any more money, so I didn't buy those yet. But I'm gonna like review one of these games. I think I'm gonna review Mario Kart Super Circuit. Alright, so this is how you set it up. Alright, you take the game, you turn it backwards, and just like that, but backwards, and push in, and turn on, and hold on, I don't have the volume up on this thing, and it works. Unfortunately, the brightness isn't good on here, so I'm gonna have to put into the light, so you can see Mario Kart Super Circuit. So it works. So here you can see it in action. Right? Let me see if I can get light on this thing. Seems like I can't. But I'm gonna get one of the Game Boy games that I have and try to play it on my Game Boy Advance. And I'm gonna bring my Nintendo DS in here because I heard that it's compatible with Game Boy Advance games. Now I'm gonna see how it works and whatnot. Alright, so be right back. Alright, y'all, I'm back. And the Game Boy game that I got is Tetris. Alright, so we're going to test this out on this in Game Boy Advance here. Right, so you put it in the same way. But you know what I don't get? How can the Game Boy Micro not play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games when like the both the slots, right? Both the slots on both the Game Boy Advance, Game Boy, and Game Boy Color are pretty much both all the same. I just don't get that. I don't get how like the cartridge slots on the Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance game systems and models are all the same, but yet again, the Game Boy Micro can play Game Boy, Game Boy Color games. Yeah, I just don't get that. And I'm also wearing my Cappy hat too again. Say hi, Cappy. Yeah, he said hi. Alright, I'm just gonna stop talking. Alright, let's see it in action. Alright. Oh wow! It even has the Game Boy startup theme, y'all. It even played the Game Boy startup sound. Oh my, y'all. Oh my. It actually does work. Here you can see it in action. Anyways, it's gonna be hard to play the thing with me holding my phone and me playing Game Boy Advance at the same time. Well, it's not really hard. It's just that the Game Boy Advance, my Game Boy Advance isn't really that bright. So yeah, if it was more brighter, then I'll be able to play on it perfectly. But unfortunately, it's not really that bright, y'all. Unfortunately, it isn't really that bright. So yeah. Alright. Next up, I have my Nintendo DS. Alright. Back of here, there are two slots. One for to put your Nintendo DS games in, and one to put your Game Boy Advance games in. Alright. We're gonna open up the Game Boy Advance line. Take this thing out. Right now it's open. Put Mario Kart Super Circuit in there. Right, like that. Have the colored sign on the back, facing backwards. And let me open up my Nintendo DS, and let's see if this works. And does it work? It says start GBA game. Let's see. Oh my, it actually does work. Yep, it actually does work. Well, alright y'all. So there y'all have it, alright? So there y'all have it. The review for the Game Boy Advance. And this thing, alright. And the Game Boy Advance came out in 2001. That was the same year when the Nintendo GameCube was released. Alright. So yeah. During its lifespan, the Nintendo GameCube came out the same year as this thing did. There was also the Nintendo DS and Wii. And it wasn't discontinued until I want to say 2010. I'm not sure. Like, I don't really know when it was discontinued, but I know it was discontinued somewhere. But I know for a fact that it was discontinued around like 2008, 2010. I know for a fact that it was discontinued around like 2008 or 2010. I'm not sure, but I'll find out soon. And yeah. So what video game system? All right. So here's what I want y'all to do in this video. All right. What I want y'all to do is maybe comment down in the comment section which video game system do y'all want me to maybe review one day. All right. What video game console system do you want me to review next? And the next video game console and video game handheld system I plan on getting. The next video game console that I plan on getting is the original Nintendo GameCube system. Alright, so the next video game console that I plan on getting is an actual Nintendo GameCube video game system, because I play all my Nintendo GameCube games on the Wii, but I just want to get a separate Nintendo GameCube system so I can maybe play my Game Boy Advance, Game Boy, and Game Boy Color games on TV. And the next handheld video game system that I maybe plan on getting is the Game Boy Color. So yeah, the next video game handheld system that I plan on getting is the Game Boy Color. Alright, but just comment down below in the comment section of what video game system do y'all want to see me do a review of in the future. Alright, so yeah, I want y'all to comment down in the comment section below what video game system y'all want to see me review in the future. Alright, so that was the Game Boy Advance. Alright, and without further ado, if y'all enjoyed, please like and subscribe. It really helps out, and from game videos every day. Anyways, guys, I love you guys. Thank y'all for watching, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.